All right, welcome back. After the beat here, Luke Thomas, Danny Segura, and Iceman Mendenhall there at the end of the table, the man in the hat. Welcome back. We appreciate you joining us. As I mentioned before, we take your questions using the hashtag #TheMMABeat. Thank you for everyone who submitted them. I'm going to say this again because this appears to be a bit of an ongoing challenge for our awesome viewing audience. Please try to pick questions about topics we're not necessarily going to get to on the show. That can be a little unpredictable, but I do list out some of them in the post. Try to avoid those because I won't be able to pick them. We have to pick things we did not get to. All right, boys, there we go.
Let's try it.
We got a nice mix of, what do you want to say? Good and idiotic.
All right.
Okay.
My favorite kind of thing.
It's right in your wheelhouse.
That is exactly the sweet spot.
That's right.
Okay, let's go to the first one, please. All right, you go first, Danny. Anyone on the panel watching Wilder versus Fury on Saturday? Thoughts or predictions?
I will be watching, and that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Wilder has had a lot of advantages over his opposition, being more athletic, younger,
Powerful.
and just powerful. But man, Fury's just as big, and I think Fury's a lot, far more technical. Wilder, he's a bit wild with his punches, and I don't know. But Fury has had a long layoff, has been through a lot. This is a very tough one. I don't know which way it's gonna go. I'm not as educated in boxing as I am in MMA, so maybe my prediction doesn't hold too much weight. But I'm gonna go with Tyson Fury.
All right, Tyson Fury, what about you, bud?
The king.
I'll definitely be watching it. I've gotten more and more into this fight as it's gotten closer, man. And maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit.
I love this fight.
Yeah, I love the fight, and but there's something about Wilder, man. Maybe it's just an American heavyweight who we haven't seen an American champion, a heavyweight champion in a while. Maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid. Maybe it's a backstory, grow up in Alabama, and all the things he's kind of gone through to get here. But I kind of sense an upset here. Not just more of a gut instinct on it. But either way, man, I like that we finally have something that's kind of fun like this again. Like it's been a while that I've cared about a heavyweight boxing match like this. Wow.
This is one of those fights where you look out there and you say, man, Showtime, you can tell they wanted to promote the balls off of this fight.
Yeah.
The multiple press conferences, the all access. Dude, those guys, Fury and Wilder, they did so much media for this. Scrums and workouts. Wilder was on my show. Fury was supposed to be on. He just duffed on all of SiriusXM, which was kind of funny. And then Wilder duffed on DJ Woo Kid. Sorry, DJ. But anyway, they did everything. Those guys went to the ends of the earth to promote this. And even yesterday, you had Esther Lynn rising above the fray.
Shout out to her.
Because Tyson Fury's taking his clothes off at a presser yesterday. Dude, it's been an unbelievable. If you haven't seen the All Access on Showtime, they put them all for free on YouTube. I highly recommend it. You know, it's funny, I was telling Chuck this before the show. The guy who does the boxing show at SiriusXM is gentleman Jerry Cooney. And he's a big man. And he was like, oh, what do you think, Luke? And I was like, I don't know. Like, kind of think Fury for all the reasons, basically. That you stated. He was like, oh, no, man. He's got Wilder's going to knock him out. I'm like, really? Like, isn't all the money coming in on Fury? He was like, bro. He says bro like 8 times. bro. He's like, what's going to happen is, this was his prediction, that Fury, the layoff, he doesn't buy that he can make a full comeback, number one. Yeah. Not even with a tune-up. It's just not possible. And then number 2, Fury does have good movement, but it's a little herky-jerky and his hands are way down. He doesn't stay gloved up. And he thinks that Wilder, while not as good of a boxer as Fury is just all he needs is 1 or 2 of those opportunities and the fight can turn on a dime.
It's funny because it does have shades of Cooney Holmes from back in ’81. Like back in the day when HBO was like doing their stuff, like it has sort of a feel to that. I know you have no idea about that, but but back then, man, I mean that was a big deal. Yeah. Cooney actually had his moment at that.
He really did. Anyway, so it's like, a heavy puncher, but not quite as good of a boxer versus a very good boxer, but all kinds of questions around him.
Undefeated, both guys.
Yeah, but both guys huge, dynamic personalities. I love this fight. I really can't wait for it.
Joshua and the
waiting in the wings. Yeah.
So that's what's always fun too. You know?
So no matter what, especially if it's Fury, but the call out after whoever gets the microphone from Jim Gray, bro, it's going to be epic. Yeah. It's going to be epic. And by the way, Paulie Malignaggi, your favorite, is going to be calling the fights. Dude, he's a great boxing commentator.
He is.
I know fans can't stand him, but he's like legitimately awesome at that. So
true.
That should be kind of fun. All right, next. Chuck, what are y'all's thoughts so far on John Boyce and Felix, that's his name, Felix Bitterman's Fighting in the Age of Loneliness, and were any of you involved in the project? To my knowledge, none of us were.
No.
Have you boys watched it?
I have not watched it yet.
Oh!
Have you?
Yes. Well, there's 5 parts. They've only released 3. I've seen all 3.
Okay.
Remember,
Good.
boys, remember.
I want to watch it. I just haven't done it yet.
You are just a millennial, clueless, and you have kids. I have roughly per month, on average, let's say somewhere around 60 hours of train time a month. I got a lot of time to kill on YouTube.
Yeah.
So yes, the answer is I've seen all 3 of the first. You guys haven't seen it?
Not
I
yet.
saw the first 30 minutes of
The first one?
yeah.
The first one.
I actually saw it before it was out.
Oh, okay, very good.
yeah.
Did you like that one?
Yes, I loved it. I thought it was great. I think, they do a really good job at telling it how it is.
Yes.
That's something me and John were talking about, because he's like, we were just exchanging, ideas, and we're just talking, and then he's like, I want you to check this out. It appeals more for the casuals, but
That's right.
I want you to check it out. And I saw it, and obviously I'm a hardcore. I know a lot about MMA. And watching it, I'm like, yeah, everything seems accurate.
cool.
Like, there's nothing that it's told differently under a certain light. Everything's pretty factual, and they tell it how it is.
Let me tell you what I think the benefit of it is. There's a lot of them. I had mentioned that they sort of set the economic and cultural zeitgeist context for why fighting evolved in the way that it did in the era in which it took place. In the world of Reagan, in the world of Bush, or in Japan with inflation and everything. So how did it happen at this time that it did? But there's something else that really always appealed to me. One of the things I like to do is sometimes I get to go and talk about stick and ball sports in my other job. I got to do it the day after Thanksgiving, covering for Adam Shine on his show. And I always bring a bit of a different perspective because my sensibilities are shaped by combat sports.
Right.
Right? I like it when the reverse happens. I like it when
same
other
here.
people talk about combat sports with the one caveat being they have to have done their homework.
Yeah.
Well, these guys did all their homework.
They did.
They bring a completely different sensibility to what you are accustomed to seeing. You will always learn something new about MMA when someone outside of MMA does their homework about MMA and then talks to you about MMA. They have a very different perspective. I can't recommend it more. Yeah.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, you'll love it.
Anything John has done, I mean, like in the past, has always been good. So, I mean, just knowing that, I was like, I got to.
Frankly, I'll be honest, I'm not overly familiar with his work, but if this is my intro, he did a Kaepernick video I liked a lot.
Yeah.
If this is my introduction, then I like what I've seen so far.
Yeah.
So there you go. Good job on that one. Next. Okay, boys, what's the best advice you've ever received? Conversely, what's the worst? Let's start with the first. Best advice you've ever received. I told you some of these were really bad.
Oh man, Jesus.
Jesus.
I remember asking Nate Diaz one time what the best advice he ever received from Nick, and he said, "Don't get no girl pregnant," which I always loved.
You know what? Wear a rubber.
That was early on.
Wear a rubber. That's a good
Man, I don't know. That's a toughie. Anything spring to mind for
Well,
you?
you boys are just dullards. You can't come up.
You throw these like philosophical, like, hey,
And
effort
also-
with the
also-
effort.
This is a
Effort with
challenge.
mankind.
Hey.
This is a challenge for you two to think on your feet. What's your favorite movie? You mean in English? In black and white?
Well, foreign-
Made this year? No, just answer the
Foreign
question.
films are different
Hey.
than.
No one is
To be
going.
fair, you get to see his questions hours before we do. So
Do
of
you
course
sit there and I think I think about that?
Of
I just
course.
saw a weird question. I just selected it.
Saver. I don't know.
Just answer the question.
My-
just give
my-
me a
okay,
piece of
I'll
advice.
say something.
All right, thank you.
My grandpa always, told me, Daniel, procure ser el mejor en todo. Means always try to be the best at everything. And the translation is not 100% right because try would be intentar. Procure is like a constant state of being. And he's just like, yeah, like if you're tying his shoes, like make sure, you do the best possible job that you can do. Like everything that you do, just try to be the best at it, Even if you don't succeed, just to have that mentality.
Make an effort, yeah.
And that's something that I carry, in everything that I do. I might not be the best at everything, but I'm surely trying to be the best version that I can be. So
Very good. See? Look at that. Huh? Amazing. Good job. I like that.
Man,
All right, Iceman.
Shay Serrano once told me to shoot your shot. Shoot your shot.
shot,
And he didn't tell me directly. He just put it out on a tweet, but I took it kind of personally. So
All right.
I really don't
that
know.
works.
I'm looking back and I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure
You
there has
can't
been.
think of anything
I
that someone
can't. I
ever
really
said to you
can't.
that was insightful
I
or
don't- I
helpful
can't
in
remember
any
a
way.
profound moment where.
I'm not asking you to recite what a conversation was at the DMV that you had.
Well, it'd have to be profound enough for me to carry it to today's show. but I don't have one.
Hi, my name's Chuck Mindenhall. I've never learned anything from anyone ever.
I've gotten a lot of bad advice.
All right, how about some bad advice?
Recalling it though off the top of my head.
Fucking Lord.
Well, let's hear yours. You picked the question.
Well, bad advice could be like, yeah, I could have another beer. I've had that a few times. Good advice. What is a piece of good advice? Here's one. Following your dreams is mostly BS. Not entirely. It's not entirely true. Here's the truth about following your dream. Because everyone's like, oh, my dream is to be in MMA media. You're not built for it then. The problem with MMA media is everyone wants to put their arm around the game. And the game literally has people putting their arm around dictators. If you want to put your arm around the game, you are complicit in that. I do have a degree of hostility towards the sport. I have much more love for it, but I have a little bit of both. If you're approaching this strictly from a perspective of, oh my God, I love MMA so much, you will be complicit in the worst kinds of humanity. So you're not built for this. Don't follow your dreams is also bad advice. What I would say to you is, find things where you're willing to work hard. And that will likely be a place where you have some success in, or that you like, right? But find a place where you do not have to manufacture the will, like, oh, today I have to get up and go type those reports, or today I have to get up and whatever. If it's that much work, you're also not built for it. But just translating your absolute dire love of something into a project can be fine. But for a lot of people, it doesn't end up well. It could end up being a contribution to the problem. Find something where where working hard is never a challenge.
That might be the best advice I've ever received.
Yeah, well, apparently the only one.
So now you want to recite what he said?
So one time Luke told me. Thank you.
Can you believe these zilches that I'm stuck with? What's your favorite burger? What do you mean what's my favorite burger?
Veggie burger, turkey burger, regular. I mean, you gotta specify, man. Come on.
I'm trying to think of the worst career advice I had ever was, what's the worst career advice I ever had? That's a tough one because it's all been bad. That's true. That's when you're like sifting through piles of bad advice. No, I don't know. Everything else is bad. There you go. Find something where working hard is easy, and then go from there. All right, next. Okay, during the I'll go to you, Danny, because I saw your tweet about this. During the Liverpool PSG game, the camera turned to only 3 people in the crowd during the game. Mick Jagger.
Mick who?
Yes. Leonardo DiCaprio, and then Habib. By the way, Habib calling the game perfectly, quite literally.
Yes.
In a crowd which included football legends and other celebrities. Does this show, Habib, is now mainstream? What do you make of that?
I think so, man. I mean, the fight with Conor McGregor was huge, right? Probably one of the biggest fights in UFC history. I think he is, and I think for Habib, he's been a big soccer fan. I know he's a Real guy, unfortunately.
He is a Real guy, yes, because he's smart.
Right. How was last weekend's game?
Good, just fine.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, did you see us at Roma winning the group? Suck it, loser.
Okay. Anyways, so yeah, I do think Habib has crossed, pop culture. I really noticed this when, I follow, and probably a lot of people do too. I follow on Instagram this account called Hood Clips, and it's basically just memes. And then they were throwing memes out there of Habib.
I do not follow Hood Clips.
It's an amazing account, and they were just throwing memes of Habib like wrestling with a bear and like a bunch of different things. Yeah. I feel like he has kind of crossed pop culture, especially over in Europe as well. Yeah, I do think Habib has crossed into mainstream.
I think that one of the big questions going into this fight was, would it transfer if he won? Or would he be considered like an icon killer? Or how would it, would it
be another Rousey Nunes situation?
Yeah, one of those situations. We weren't sure. He was obviously a little bigger, I think, than some of the other names going into the fight. People kind of knew him a little bit. But I think that he kind of had this reputation as like this cold-blooded wrestler. Well, we saw just how icy his veins really are, and I felt like that translated. I feel like now we look at him as something imposing in the fight game collectively, rather than just us people in the bubble. And his sense of conviction on these things, I think, has also made him like really big. Yeah. I wasn't sure at the time, but now I'm pretty convinced that he's crossed over. It'd be really interesting to see if he's not fighting Conor McGregor, whoever he fights, what happens on his next fight. How big will it seem?
Also, I thought for a second that, this is me downing the size of MMA. since I'm in the bubble, they were showing shots and it'd be DiCaprio, right? Habib in there. So I thought, oh,
They weren't together, right? Like those guys weren't in the same. They were
in the
separate areas.
I did not
No,
see
they
the
were in the
game.
same
Okay.
shot. They were nearby each other.
Okay.
They were like maybe a row.
like
or
No, but they
two.
weren't like this.
No.
Okay.
So they're like in an
they were showing a
MVP
bigger shot, and I thought
area.
it was to highlight DiCaprio. And I'm like, oh wait, is that Habib? And then they would go to single shots to Habib. So I'm like, okay, yeah, they're
That does
definitely paying
speak volumes, though, right? Like, because Mick Jagger obviously being like who he is, and DiCaprio being who he is, and now Nurmagomedov.
And I mean, the PSG official account interviewed him and had a prediction of him, which he was completely on point.
Do you know PSG?
Paris
don't,
Saint-Germain,
not really.
yeah.
It's Paris Saint-Germain. It's the biggest club in France. Big time star. Neymar. You ever heard of
Neymar's
Neymar?
there, yeah.
Neymar plays there.
Great actor, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Angel Di Maria plays there. Like big time footballers. Mbappe plays there. Like the guy who was like the best guy at the World Cup.
Yeah.
He plays there. And so the account for that, dude, their gear is all made by the Jordan brand. Okay, they're the first soccer team to do that. Their official account had Habib, and they were interviewing him. And dude, Habib was like, I think PSG is going to win 2-1 against a very good Liverpool team, and they did. They won 2-1.
And he's like, yeah, you can ask me anything. I know everything about soccer.
like-
I know.
And he does.
Yeah.
He goes, I can tell you who's on the French 1998 World Cup team. And I believe him. I believe him.
I did not know that about
Yeah,
him.
isn't
I
that
didn't know he was
wild?
a fanatic like that.
Yeah, and he met, this is long before the McGregor fight, but he met with Cristiano Ronaldo last season.
Yeah.
When he was still with Madrid, and they did a jersey swap, and they took pictures and shit.
He was
Like,
taking selfies with Gigi Buffon after the game.
did he really?
Yeah.
No way, I didn't know that.
Well, all that's going to translate very well for Habib Nurmagomedov. You know what I mean? Because that's such a huge cultural thing. So.
And I mean, and it's like turns him into like a bit of a global star to a degree.
yeah.
You know, I mean, I gotta say, Habib I don't even like PSG, but that's a big ass team, man. And then you got, you got Connor going to the Dallas Cowboys, a team full of
perfect spiral.
a team full of losers and vagrants. And let's just be real about it. By the way, to my previous point, saw a lot of people sharing the picture of Habib doing the stuff in Kenya, or I think it was Kenya, with the Wells, which is an amazing thing. Didn't see a lot of pictures outside of certain people's accounts about him meeting with Kadyrov, which I know is a complicated topic.
Yeah.
He might have to do it for his own personal safety. I'm just saying, back to the previous point, maybe not everyone's cut out for this job.
Yeah.
All right, next. Let's see. Okay, this question I didn't like, but there was a part of it I liked. Will we see any organizations push back against the UFC's pay-per-view social media model and try to maintain the integrity of a proper martial arts ranking system, at least not be as obvious in easy promoted cash grabs, perhaps? I think we're trending in a weird direction. Okay, I brought this up because the answer is obviously PFL, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They just have a system where it's like, here's the bracket, fight through it.
Yep.
And Bellator tried it as well. We've had this debate a million times about Bellator and pay-per-view and tournaments and the value. And I think we all kind of agree. Every once in a while, tournaments can be pretty great. So why bring up this question? The issue for me is, why do people believe, because they do, that the matchmaker model is broken? It's like every piece of evidence, there are cases where stars got launched from tournaments.
Yeah.
For the most part, they don't. And for the most part, they don't with the matchmaker model either. But if you look at the vast majority of stars who have ever been stars in MMA, the overwhelming majority came from the matchmaker model. And yet, there is more skepticism about the matchmaker model than there is about anything else.
Yeah.
Now, why is that?
I think a lot of the skepticism comes from the new era of fans that are only exposed to the matchmaking system. But if you go back and you're like, all right, well, I want you to sit through and watch the very early Bellator tournaments.
Yeah.
You tell me if that's a better model. I'm sure they would have a different opinion on that matter. And the fact is, the tournament is nice once you got elite fighters, but to groom prospects, the tournament format is horrible, right? Because they need the proper matchmaking. They need proper opponents. So for sure, for a health standpoint, the matchmaking system, caters and grooms certain aspects, and then the tournament does others. I think the combination is the best. But back to your example, the only thing that we're really exposed nowadays is really the matchmaking one, which has been based a lot of popularity. But man, if you go back and watch the tournaments, I'm sure you'll have a different opinion.
I mean, one of the original endearing things about the UFC was that there was no place to hide. If you were a good fighter going up, you were going to have to face. There was no mercy. They were trying to knock you off. You know what I'm saying? Like they put the best and the best momentums against the best momentums. To me, that's the only model. I mean, I like the tournaments, but if you're talking about running an organization, the only sustainable model is the matchmaking one. It's mostly done right. I think that in this new era of like, the new ownership and everything, maybe there has been some favoritism. Maybe there has been some like, hey, well, let's put these guys a bigger fight. There's been a little bit of that. It gets more and more prevalent, but at the same time, they just booked Israel Adesanya against Anderson Silva. Why are they doing that? Well, it makes sense, I think. We never got to this topic earlier, but it makes sense on a lot of levels. It makes sense for the guy at the two ships passing in the night. I like that.
Chuck's a smart man.
See, now I realize we would have had a conflict if we had talked about this earlier. But
I know, I need more arguments.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally like it because you have the guy who's the original Matrix Sublime striker going against the new one. You know what I mean? And it's kind of two ships passing in the night. But I just think that the matchmakers, they consider a lot. You know what I mean? They consider a lot of factors, more so these days. But I've always loved that basically the two best guys are supposed to be facing each other. They're always on a collision course, and I feel like that's the matchmakers. It could be in a tournament, but you got to have both those guys in the tournament, right? Or you got to have. It doesn't sustain itself that way. That's it.
That's all I got.
You just love this idea of Israel Adesanya and Anderson Silva.
It. Yes, I think it makes.
Were you guys talking about it on Monday?
Y'all are going to be epically disappointed.
We did discuss it a little bit on Monday.
If that's the case, though, it's as long as Anderson Silva doesn't look like Chuck Liddell, I'm like it's a showcase fight for Adesanya.
He's so far from that.
No, I know.
I don't think anyone is prescribing that. We're saying that would be a worst case scenario, which I think we're pretty far from. I would agree with that.
That wouldn't be nice to watch.
I expected it to be competitive for a time and then not, and then we're all be like, oh right, that's what that was about. I mean, I still think that like Adesanya, to me, he's one of the most. No, he is the most exciting talent for me inside MMA today, right?
I agree with you.
That is where I rank him, which means now is the time to see exactly how good he is, which Jacare doesn't want to do it. I get it. Okay, fine. At least not on the timeline.
I would have preferred to see that fight.
But the Silva fight, it's like, do any of us really think that the outcome is like tough to figure out? MMA's crazy. If Silva wins, that would not be the craziest win. I recognize it. Everyone's going to rub this in my face if he wins. But I find that to be extraordinarily unlikely.
Yeah.
I mean, can you say the same thing when Silva went up to fight, was it James Irvin, right, or Stephan Bonner? Like
he was the favorite when he fought both of those guys.
Silva.
Yes.
Okay, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like,
that's what you're saying? Adesanya will be the favorite by a country mile.
The matchmaking shouldn't be based just strictly on, it's got to be even on the odds or anything. We've seen mismatches on the
Part of me, there's how would you explain it? Like a nostalgia, but it's not quite like that. It's just you never got to see Anderson Silva in some of the crazy matchups that you always wanted to see. GSP, John Jones, the guys like that. It's like sort of like at the tail end of it, you're seeing him against a guy on the rise. It kind of fills a weird need with him in his career that I'm like maybe had not felt satisfied before because he was fighting guys, like Patrick Cote and people like that. He was not getting the guys that you wanted to see him against, know. So in one way, it's sort of like...
That's a good point.
It's almost like you're retroactively looking at it and thinking like, well, now he's going to fight this guy who's very exciting for his style.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. If you look at it from Adesanya's perspective, you're like, dude, he should crush the old man. You know what I mean?
We crush him with impunity.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. It's like, do I get why the fight is being made? Yes, of course I do. I still think there's a bit of an issue about how much star power he has left to give to somebody who beats him. I think Weidman took a lot of that, so there's still a bit of an issue there, but not totally because the Nick Diaz fight I thought was a pretty important fight for both those guys. Okay, fine. So it shows you put two dynamic figures together, so you can get something interesting. And I get that star making is alchemy. I get that too. I get it. But at 29 versus 43, it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to. I don't know why I'm supposed to feel giddy about this.
We're also thinking like 43 sounds old, right, for a fighter. I mean, that's how old Tito Ortiz is.
43 is old.
It is. But let's keep in mind that Anderson Silva is not a guy that peaked in his 20s. This is a guy that peaked in his 30s. He really got good once he was close to 40s. I mean, he was still champion late in his 30s.
Yeah, but there are questions surrounding that now with the issues he had with anti-doping.
Yeah, for sure. But he was also a guy that was in, unlike Chuck Liddell, who was known as a brawler and a really physical fighter, he was known for his technique. So this is not someone that his prime was, God knows how long. Anderson Silva, I still think, and I stand by this, he has a bit of a bad image out there. He's actually more competitive than what actually people make him out to be. I still think he's a top 15 middleweight. Top 15 middleweight versus Israel Adesanya? Sign me up.
Maybe
that
this
was
is
basically
UFC's way of sending him to the glue factory, man. Like they're just saying, like, this is it.
That's a horrible way to put it. Jesus.
It's a win-win either way. I think if Adesanya loses, it's not a big setback, and then now all of a sudden you got the star back with Anderson Silva.
Also, Silva will get a title fight.
Yeah.
I mean, which
that'll
is
do well. Yeah.
crazy.
Well, he says.
Okay, I mean, yes, the UFC can obviously withdraw that offer, but still, in theory, it's like, wow, it's kind of crazy. All right, next. Oh God, you guys are gonna love this one. What is a recent book, movie, TV show? Any of them. Doesn't have to be one of each, just something you recently watched.
I'm just kidding.
Watched or read that you would recommend. Any kind of book, movie, or TV show recommendation. Any of them. I mean, we couldn't give you a bigger layup.
I just read Bernard Malamud's Magic Barrel. He's written The Natural. He's written a lot of well-known things. This is his collection of short stories. It's just like timeless. I've read it before, but it's just like these timeless little stories, and I love that. Brian Phillips, Impossible Owls. He's a guy from The Ringer who's a really, really good writer. I read that recently, or got that. Man, what else is out? Loose Balls about the ABA. Got that sitting on my shelf right now, ready to read.
Fun.
Yeah. Those are just some book recommendations.
Those are great. Those are great.
Yeah, I recently saw a documentary on Netflix about 7-5, it's called.
7-5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's about a police unit in New York City in the 70s, I think, or 80s.
Jesus.
Back
when it was hell.
Yeah, and it was a corrupt cub that used to work with, well, I don't want to ruin it, but...
Spoiler.
No, that's not actually a spoiler because they state that out right from the front. But it's just a story of a corrupt cub that used to work in Brooklyn, back when it was horrible, and all his stories, and how he became aide to one of the biggest drug traffickers. And it's just an insane story. And they interview all the parties involved, and it's a great documentary.
Wow. Cool. Okay, I will go with. I see so many people all follow this. In MMA, you get fans who all follow the same intellectual leadership, and it all mostly comes from. I found this out over time. It comes from Joe Rogan's podcast, which I have no problem with. Take leadership from wherever you can get it if it's reasonable enough, and I certainly take no issue with it. That's fine. Do all those things, but everyone is a little one note with it. Mm-hmm. So I would add to the name. I've talked about his books in the past, but he has a new one out. It's much shorter. It's only about 150 pages. The Curse of Bigness by Tim Wu. Basically, what he argues is that the industries in which we primarily rely upon in this country, including some of the most important ones like telecom, they are all consolidating. And there's tons of proof around this, by the way. He goes and lays out the case. But basically there's two problems with this. One, like everyone was like when the guy got beat on the airline, the United Airlines, when they dragged him off and they knocked his teeth out, people were like, I'm gonna boycott. Here's how I know you're lying. You can't. You can't. Yes, some of you, if you live close to a hub, can take Delta, but for the most part, people want cheap tickets, and you have no choices. It's United or Spirit or American. You're going to take whatever's the cheapest one because you like your chances of not getting your teeth knocked out, right? This is just the reality of it. And so you go look at telecom, you have Google and you have Apple, and these profoundly affect the way in which you interact with the world, and more to the point, when you have consolidation of industry, you now open it up to authoritarian takeover. He is a former Supreme Court clerk, Tim Wu. He's a law professor at Columbia University here in New York City, and he's the guy who came up with the term net neutrality. So go check out The Curse of Bigness. There you go.
That does sound like a good recommendation.
Yeah, and it's an easy read. 150 pages. Yeah. You can just fire through it.
Even you could do that one.
Yeah, of course. I don't have to just watch stuff on Netflix.
All right, I think we have any more. We have one more? One more. Let's do it. All right, here we go. Which MMA fighter's life story would you most like to see be made into a biopic? Now, there are more obvious candidates, but this person says, I think Dominic Cruz movie could get someone an Oscar. Matt Hamill and Jose Aldo biopics already exist, by the way.
Well, I'll tell you what. After reading Ian Heinish's story about muling drugs, could you imagine that being made into a movie?
I spoke to him, too, on my show.
Yeah.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
What a life.
It's got all the components.
Yeah.
of a good biopic. I think that, it's almost so improbable it seems like,
It's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard of, and I've heard some crazy ones.
So that would be a good one. I'm
trying to think. I think after John Jones is done with his career, I think that'll be because it's still a lot in the air of how he will be remembered. But
will he be remembered as a hero, you think?
I don't know. I think
Hero's a strong word, but
we'll
good
have
guy?
to wait and see what happens in the next few years. But I think with what's happened already, there's already, there's a lot to tell there.
I mean, Cormier's too.
Yeah.
Going back to all his.
I mean, that could be one combined together. Those guys are.
Yeah.
Someone, I think, replied to that tweet, and they said Chris Lieben.
Yeah.
Lieben's got a hell of a... By the way, he was out there reffing and judging
Yeah, he was.
at Golden Boy
How about
MMA
that
1.
guy? Wasn't he selling houses recently too? Like he's all over the place.
You know what? But he's I wasn't surprised by that because if you've ever interviewed him, he loves teaching.
Yeah.
And I think just being a part of the game in some capacity, having a say, he really likes that. And good, because I think he'd be a competent judge and certainly a great referee. Frank Trigg's one of those guys too. I'm trying to think of like somebody else. Matt Hughes.
Lee Murray.
Seriously, Lee Murray.
Can you imagine?
Well, wow, that would be a great one.
know.
How'd you end up in it's like, you could start it. So I ended up in a Moroccan jail.
Yeah.
Here's how I got here.
By trying to heist $50 million.
By trying to pull off the biggest robbery in the history of the UK. Biggest bank robbery, anyway. Is there anyone else we're not thinking of, like maybe outside? I feel like Crow Cop would have an interesting one.
Yeah. I know we're gonna you'll kick yourself because there are probably some really good ones.
I know whenever we do this and we get
know.
off, people always have like amazing suggestions that we never thought of. It's always like, there's a bunch. But interesting that the Dominic Cruz one, any smaller guy that you count. That's a tougher one.
Yeah. Man,
It's hard, right?
Yeah.
Norifumi Yamamoto, perhaps.
Yeah.
Kid Yamamoto, that could be one. Because he was such a towering figure.
Definitely could be.
And then gone too soon kind of thing.
There's so many stories in MMA, obviously, of people who came from broken something. So anything like that, obviously, is going to have a...
Maybe Henry Cejudo.
Henry Cejudo's a decent one.
We got a good story.
I don't know if it would be making for a major motion picture, but I do think if Dustin Poirier ever gets a title...
Yeah.
Bro, you ever seen the Fightville?
I did.
Yeah.
Dustin Poirier, from the trenches, that guy has raised himself.
I'd be interested in seeing like the Diaz brother.
That's another good one.
You know what I mean? Just
the
to
Diaz
know.
brothers, that would be actually a really good one.
I mean,
you could just
there's
call
a
it
ton.
Diaz. Oh my God, it'd be amazing. it'd be amazing.
Michael Moore presents.
Yeah, I don't know if he's the right candidate for that. Who's the British guy who does all the MMA documentaries? I've had him on my show, and his name escapes me.
Oh,
Bobby Razak?
Yes,
Yeah, Bobby Razak, whatever.
Yeah.